I think the special envoy question itself depends, first of all, on what you need that goes beyond an ambassador on the ground, and second, whether you have presidential backing. You can have special envoys who are basically a way of taking something off the table the White House doesn't want to deal with, but an envoy that is not supported usually doesn't accomplish anything. So I think one has to differentiate between the function and the support that can make the function work. Envoys do no better than anybody else if they're not backed up and supported. We've had several of those recently in the Middle East, all who have passed from close memory. With Holbrooke, you clearly have support with Ambassador Holbrooke. You clearly have the support of the president. And there is a particular utility because of the interrelationship of the Afghan and Pakistani issues, but separate countries, so that one ambassador doesn't easily link. Now, do you really need a special envoy? You could have the assistant secretary playing the same role. Holbrooke was the assistant secretary for European affairs when he played much the same role in the Balkans. So I think the role is one thing. The function, whether you call it an envoy, whether you call it the assistant secretary, this is kind of like, what color you like your car. It could, but it need not. This is a function of humans and personalities, not of bureaucratic wiring diagrams. The Secretary of State has plenty of other things to be doing, and the world is a large place. So I think, one, a careful envoy, and I believe Ambassador Holbrooke will be careful, will make sure that his flank is covered with the Secretary of State, that this is not a contest between the two of them. And secondly, a Secretary of State who has a lot of other things that she needs to do, and I think Secretary Clinton is showing that she knows there's a lot of other things to do, can make use of the special envoy to allow her to focus on a great many other issues. There is a tendency in administrations to have everybody want to run to the main issue. It's like seeing a bunch of small kids play soccer where everybody runs to the ball. That doesn't get you either good soccer or good government. I think it is most important to the war in Afghanistan because the money from the drug trade is not only of some importance to the Taliban, that can be exaggerated, but it rots and corrupts the structure of the Afghan state. I would put that importance first. Secondly, it is important to the international heroin traffic. Afghanistan produces something like 97% of the world's opium base. But there's also a history of drugs moving from one place to another place. So I don't consider myself a drug expert in any kind of world sense, so I don't think I can comment very well on the second issue. But I do think that both are part of the problem for Afghanistan.
Fair enough. And then finally,
you might notice, by the way, that it is primarily a European problem at this point. That doesn't mean we should take any comfort in that, but the vast majority of Afghan drugs go to Europe and to Russia. A very small part of them comes here. Of the military, a very small portion. The main brunt of that fight has been with the Drug Enforcement Agency, DEA, with FBI, Justice Department cooperation, with building prosecutorial structures and courts. So there's a lot of U.S. government involvement, including a big involvement, which pays for most of the other, from the Department of State, their INL Bureau. But it's primarily on these very civilian agencies that the burden has fallen, not on the military. Military role is really comparatively limited, taking out a certain number of processing facilities from time to time when they can do it in the course of other operations. Those are fairly small operations, easily replaced. And the other is backup for the civilians for certain kinds of raids, eradication, things like this, where if things get really hot, they may need military support, but they don't need the military to conduct the operations themselves. I think there are certainly potential tools, but I wouldn't want to say you can guarantee them, but we have chosen as a nation not to build the tools and not to prepare a toolkit in advance. And we are now starting to do that with this Crisis Stabilization and Reconstruction Force that has been authorized for the State Department. For the first time this year, we have money to actually have people in that. And that includes not just State Department officers, but Agency for International Development, AID, people from Homeland Security, Treasury, Justice, a reserve force within the federal government, and then a second level of reserve that can be mobilized with people with technical backgrounds, particularly in the civilian world. This is the toolkit we did not have in Afghanistan when we went into Iraq. And as a military colleague pointed out to me, it's a toolkit we didn't have in Haiti or Panama or Grenada or any of the 20 years of previous interventions we've made in which we've treated this requirement as something that we would have never done before and would never do again. It was always the first and the last time to be done by inventing it at the moment. This is not a particularly good pattern when you both look at the situations where one might intervene without the military to head off things from worsening, and also in areas where you have military intervention. There is, of course, a discussion about should we ever do it again, but the fact is it's happened in every administration, in every party for the last 2 or 3 decades, so if the past is prologue, the odds are pretty good we'll do it again. It would look like contingency money, skills, and personnel that you can deploy without having a 6-month debate in Congress after you make a decision to deploy, or without finding that they're without money and support to carry out any policy.